Okay, so this is a skill analysis of the single arm dumbbell snatch. And so it's a fairly complex full body exercise where essentially you're bringing the weight from the ground and you're catching it overhead. And where this differs from, say, the clean is you're not catching the weight at shoulder level, you're catching it overhead. So it's on the more difficult side of things. So we're going to watch 2 reps of Quinn's technique before breaking down the exercise into the different phases.
Go ahead.
Alright, so we'll stop here. So this is the starting phase, starting position. And so as we can see with Quinn here, he is leaning a little bit forward. And so the first thing I notice is his heels are actually coming off the ground a little bit. So you can see in this photo here that his heels are off the ground. His knees also tracking a little bit far forward. Ideally in any sort of weight bearing squatting exercise such as this one, you want to avoid any forward knee tracking as much as possible. And as you can see here, his knee is certainly not in line with his toes. Third thing to point out, his starting position of where the weight is, it's also quite far forward, so naturally he's going to be leaning forward to grab the weight. And so basically when you're doing this exercise, you want to keep the weight as close to your center of gravity as possible, and that's going to help you keep stable throughout the exercise. And then the last thing to mention here, his spine position, as you can see, it's a little bit rounded here, and so that can be problematic, especially long term. If he continues to do this way, it's going to put unnecessary pressure on his spine. So you're going to want to have straight as back as possible, and you can see especially in his lumbar portion of the spine, he's really got some curvature going on. So we'll see the next part of the phase here. So this is the catch phase, and as I mentioned before, ideally you want the catch to be overhead for the snatch, whereas the clean, you're catching it at shoulder level. So Quinn's kind of in between here. You can see some obvious bending in his elbows, and so in this position we'd actually want his arm to be fully extended over his head. Again, his knees are quite heavily tracking forward. This can be problematic, especially for people with knee pain. This is a good way to re-aggravate any sort of knee injury and also cause knee injuries, especially when they get to heavier weight bearing exercises. And then again, heels coming off the ground, that's not helping his center of gravity. He's obviously not stable in this position. His back position, not too bad. You can see a bit of a curve in the lumbar spine, could suggest that he's maybe slightly overextending a little bit, and this is a way of compensating for a lack of core strength. On this side of things, you can see his left knee is slightly further back, and so that's not ideal. You want to have a even stance for these types of exercises, so that's something I would get him to work on, just really making sure his stance stays even throughout the whole exercise. And then the finish phase, not a whole lot going here. Really the most noticeable thing, he's still leaning forward a little bit. You can see a slight gap between his heel and the floor, and also his spine is noticeably extending more than I'd like. You can see it right here. Again, it's a way of compensating for a lack of core strength, so his body is moving forward and his spine is compensating for that fact. So really you want to keep in a neutral spine in this position. Good way of doing that, you can actually clench your glutes. It's one technique of helping spinal stabilization for these types of exercises. So definitely some things to work on for the dumbbell snatch, but it's a pretty complex exercise and it does take a lot of practice, so some pretty concrete things to work on.